I am very pleased to introduce Stuart Graybill, the very first Didion faculty scholar at Sacramento City College. Stuart taught his first history course at Sacramento City College in the early 90s and began teaching full-time there in 2001. Since then, he's taught California and U.S. history, as well as the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I am just very honored to introduce Stuart Graybill.
My talk is really about how the landscapes and environment affects us and how we affect the landscapes and environment. California is widely renowned for being one of the places in the world that has completely re-engineered its environment. What have we done about water? There are parts of California where water is plentiful. There are parts where it's not. And so what do? We move it from places where it's plentiful to places where it's not. What's the longest canal in the Americas? The California Aqueduct. It's 700 miles long. And so if you got a canal that's 700 miles long, what's it got to do? It's got to be pretty flat the whole way because you don't want it moving too fast. How do you make that happen? You have to move a hell of a lot of dirt. That's just one of the ways in which we've completely re-engineered California. We have literally moved mountains. And we've done more of that kind of thing in California than in any other place in the country and most other places in the world. It was a great image. This is a line from Joan Didion wrote years ago. She said, "It's very easy to sit at the bar and say La Scala in Beverly Hills or Ernie's in San Francisco and to share in the pervasive delusion that California is only 5 hours from New York by air. The truth is, La Scala and Ernie's are only 5 hours from New York by air. California is someplace else." Well, there's an image there you see of glaciers piled up in the North American and Eurasian continents at the height of the last ice age, somewhere between 25,000 and 18,000 years ago. The ice sheet that covers North America extends all the way down. It entirely covers places like Michigan, Wisconsin. Scientists call this the Wisconsin glaciation. This glaciation and others dug the Great Lakes. Now, if we take a look at another one there, you can see this perspective from a little bit different scene. It's just North America. And then you see a bright white stripe there covering the Sierras. Yeah. The top of the Sierras is over 14,000 feet. How far down did the glaciers extend? Probably somewhere around 7,500 feet. What about here? What about right here? What's the temperature like right here 25,000 years ago tonight? It's not much different. Temperatures didn't vary radically. California had a Mediterranean climate 25,000 years ago, just as it does now. That means it gets hot and it gets dry in the summertime. There are no glaciers in Sacramento. That's the jet stream. The jet stream originates more or less in the Gulf of Alaska at any particular time. It picks up moisture from the Gulf of Alaska, then it flows down, and today it hits places like British Columbia and Washington and Oregon, and then sort of undulates across the continent. And it varies by a few hundred miles, depending on the season. Because there were giant ice sheets covering North America 25,000 years ago, that jet stream was pushed 500 to 1,000 miles south of where it runs now. So that means 25,000 years ago, Washington, with all those lush trees and forests, was dry. What was California like? How much rain do we get a year? 18, 19 inches. In the last ice age, it was wetter, maybe 25, maybe 30, much as 30 inches. And the length of winter is a little longer. If it's not that much colder, how do the glaciers form? The answer to that is the Sierras get more snow during the wet time of the year. And every year, a little bit more of that snow survives through the summer. The crucial thing with ice ages isn't the temperature in January. It's the temperature in August. And if the temperature in August isn't high enough to melt all the snow, more snow will build up. And white snow will reflect a lot of light. So how cold can it be in the Sierras? It can be 15 or 20 degrees colder on average there than around here 25,000 years ago. That is, the average here didn't change very much, but the average up there changed a lot. Because with every succeeding year, a little bit more snow survives the summer. It reflects more light. And as it grows larger, particularly by the summer, it'll reflect much more light locally. And then that'll change the temperature a lot. More ice will survive. And after about 5,000 years of doing that, you get a glacier. What are those? Redwoods. They're big. They're old. Their roots connect, so one redwood tree isn't actually one redwood tree. There are two kinds of sequoias. Sequoia sempervirens. In Latin, that's what? Always living. Those are the coast redwoods. What are the ones that grow over in Yosemite? Giganteum, yes, they're appropriately named, right? They're huge. In volume, they can be 50% larger than those trees, even though they're shorter. How long have those trees been around? Hundreds of millions of years. But now they're kind of Goldilocks trees, right? Things have to be just right. The ones on the coast, how do they survive? Fog. A coast redwood can draw 2,000 pounds of water out of the atmosphere on a summer day. That's a ton of water. What's that? If you look at that, and you're from here, you kind of look at it and you say, home. That's home. Those are native California oak trees. If you were to say this is a picture of California 25,000 years ago, there's one thing, if you know what you're looking for, there'd be one thing that would tell you automatically, yeah, that's not 25,000 years ago. It's the yellow grass. That's not native to California. Those are grizzly bears, yeah. Maybe in packs. There seems to be some evidence that maybe California grizzly bears lived in packs. That isn't the kind of grass we see in the summertime, though. That's California bunch grass. It's native to California, but it's almost gone. How about that one on the left? What color is it? It's California purple needle grass. That's a native grass. That goes back a lot more than 25,000 years, and it's almost gone. How long now have human beings been right here? Where have people been living longer? Sacramento or London? Sacramento. A lot longer. 15,000 years ago, London was covered by ice. Human beings have been right here for longer than human beings have been there. How long has it been that human beings have been here? There's been a recent discovery just about 5 years ago now in New Mexico of these footprints. And initially the scientists determined that they were about 23 to 21,000 years. This is pretty solid evidence that human beings were in White Sands, New Mexico, at least 21,000 years ago. How did human beings get to North America? The prevailing hypothesis right now is boats. It's like getting a boat like Inuits' boats. We know how they travel, a few miles at a time, around the edge of the ice. Where did people who inhabited North America and South America come from? Asia. Northeast Asia. How do we know that? Genetics. How'd they get here? By boat. Now we have some problem with trying to figure out how long human beings have been here, because the only kind of evidence we have is indirect evidence. We don't have a skull or some big bone that we can look at. The oldest skeleton found in North America was found on that island there. And it's been positively dated to about 13,000 years ago. That's the oldest direct human remains found in North America so far. There's human beings. How long ago was it? You can tell by what's in the picture. What kind of animals are in the picture? See some pachyderms there? Columbian mammoths. There's woolly mammoths too, but they're different. Woolly mammoths have hair. Go back 25,000 years ago. Would a lot of the things that are around here be kind of similar? Would it be kind of familiar? Yes, because the temperature was pretty close. That's the San Francisco Bay. Well, it's not a bay. It's a valley. What's way out there at the edge where the ocean is? The Farallon Islands. How far away? Roughly 20 miles. And 25,000 years ago, you could have walked to them, because the glaciers piled up so much water on the continents that oceans were 400 feet lower than they are today, and that exposes this great big plain. And the Farallons are not islands 25,000 years ago, they're hills. But gradually the planet started warming after 18,000 years ago, slowly warmed, and as it warmed, what happened to glaciers? They melted. Oceans rose. Okay, watch this. San Francisco Bay is now a bay. What about right here? We're underwater. 2,000 years ago, what were things like right here? The melt actually was more progressed 2,000 years ago than it is now. So the shoreline was higher. But then it got colder again, which is not unusual for ice ages. And that brings us to the Holocene. What's the Holocene? That's us. That's human beings and the environment and our participation in it. That's the weather pattern we've been in for the last 2,000 years or so. So in your lifetimes, how's the weather changed around here? Fog is gone. What happened to that? It's gotten a little warmer. It's gotten a little too warm and a little too dry for fog, Thule fog. Mount Diablo used to average 12 snow days a year. And in the last 20 years, it's averaged close to 0. That's California's hydrology. The water that comes out of the Sierras and the various places it winds up going. There's a big water hole in the San Joaquin Valley. What's that one called? Tulare Lake. Tulare Lake was the biggest lake west of Minnesota and Louisiana almost 200 years ago in surface area. Where is it now? It doesn't exist anymore. There's the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta 2,000 years ago, up to 200 years ago. The deep sort of turquoise color, that's water, 9 months of the year or so. What do we call it today? The Delta. But for most of the last 2,000 years, that's been pretty well watered most of the year. How come it isn't now? Have we re-engineered the Delta? Yes. So there's been people here for a long time. Human beings had to come inland from somewhere. The two most likely places are first, the Bay Area, and secondly, Los Angeles. And over the next several thousand years, we know by at least 13,000 years ago, there were human beings in the Santa Barbara Islands. And there's all kinds of evidence of the remains of what native Californians ate in the Bay Area. Shell mounds that go back thousands of years. 500 years ago, California had the largest population of human beings before Europeans arrived. And they were right here. This is ground zero for the highest population concentrations anywhere in what is today the United States by a wide, wide margin. Why was here so fortuitous? Water, the American River, the Sacramento River, the Feather River, the Yuba River. Those are extraordinarily nutritious places. Salmon, steelhead trout, acorns, lots of different kinds of berries. Now, Native Americans had a significant effect on their environment. The main thing that gets mentioned frequently is fire. How'd they use fire? Keep the brush down. They controlled it. When do they light fires? After the first rainfall in the fall. Why? They don't tend to get out of control. But because they light so many fires, they used it to control oak populations. It adds nutrition to the soil. Most acorns need a fire to burn off the husk so that they will germinate. When the Spanish first arrived permanently in 1769, started establishing missions. Most of those missions were complete by 1821. Where are the Spanish primarily in 1821? In the coast. How much of California have they settled? A very small part. If you're a native Californian in 1821 and somebody tells you, well, the Spanish have come and settled this area, would you be okay with that word? From your perspective, what happened? Invasion, because for the people who lived here at the time, that's what it felt like. That's Spanish and Mexican land grants up to 1846 or so. Anybody know what the Hispanic population of California was around that time period? 30 to 40,000, yeah. How many Indians? We'll get to that in a minute. Cattle were agents of environmental revolution in California. Cattle. And they spread out everywhere along the coasts. And by the 1840s, there's somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million of them. They far outnumber the human beings. You know, this just says California to me, and it's not natural. What made it? Well, the cattle brought invasive species in their hooves and in their gut, in their feces, in their poop. That's not California bunchgrass, and that's not purple needlegrass, native California grasses. It's European wild oats. And in the last 150 years, it has come to dominate the grasslands of California. What's next to the rivers? Riparian forests. California used to have 500,000 acres of riparian forests. Now we're down to like 80,000 acres, something like that. How many people are in the Sacramento Valley in 1846? Maybe something like 100,000, 90,000 of whom are Indians. Okay. What happens to the Indians? California is the place of the worst incidents of genocide in United States history. And by genocide, I mean it in its old-fashioned sense. The deliberate effort to exterminate a population, not to destroy their culture or some other thing, but the deliberate effort to exterminate the people. Between 1770 and the 1840s, Native American populations in California dropped by more than half. That wasn't part of the genocide. What was that? Disease. Smallpox. Measles. Native Americans didn't have immunities to any of those diseases because they were isolated here in North America after those diseases emerged. After 1845, people right here, white people in Sacramento, worked very hard to exterminate 3 classes of living beings: gray wolves, grizzlies, and Indians. And between 1845 and 1880, the population of Native Americans was nearly exterminated in the Central Valley. That wasn't accidental. It wasn't coincidental. It was the determined efforts of folks to make it happen. Well, of course, that's right around the time the gold rush. Gold rush transformed America. What did people do to get gold? You could say the first major environmental movement in the United States was created by hydraulic mining, which washed literally billions of tons of dirt and rock and stone into rivers, created enormous problems in the Central Valley. The soil is very sandy, and it's got a lot of quartz and mica and stuff. This isn't native to the Central Valley 500 years ago or even 200 years ago. And it flooded towns, it flooded Sacramento repeatedly, flooded Marysville, flooded Yuba City, flooded Chico and Redding and lots of other places. And the first major environmental movement in the United States was an effort to try to stop it. And here's one of the images of the public relations campaign to do away with hydraulic mining. The little red dots are on federal land, the green dots are in state land, yellow's local, and then there's private lands. What kinds of things flow out of old abandoned mines? Quicksilver, mercury, lead, heavy metals of a bunch of kinds. Do we have a big heavy metal problem in California? There's Sacramento in the 1850 flood. And this is before the streets were raised. This is before the houses were built 8 feet off the ground. This is also before hydraulic mining. This is just the norm. And that quote there, that's one of Joan Didion's quotes. The annual reappearance of a marsh that didn't drain to the sea until late spring or summer was referred to locally not as flooding, but as the high water. 175 years ago, there were 3 million acres of old-growth redwoods in California. Today, there's something around 60,000 acres, and all of it in protected areas. Joan Didion talks about this a lot in several of her essays, where, California is a get-rich-quick place. Things are just waiting for you to pick up off the ground, or cut down, or drill into the ground and take it. And she speaks a lot about California's culture of getting rich quick. What's that? Is this wild country? No. It's the idyllic farm, a pastoral scene. Are human beings changing the environment there, though? They're plowing up the ground, yeah, and introducing new species that weren't here before. What's that? Dryland wheat farming. That's about 25 miles southeast of here. Now, there's a lot of people that see that guy's face and they boo and they hiss. Boo. William Mulholland, the engineer who designed and created the Owens Valley, Los Angeles aqueduct, which is primarily famous for draining the Owens Valley of water and shipping it to Los Angeles. 1900, things are starting to change real fast. There's a dredge, steam-powered dredge, Folsom, 1906. If you go up around Folsom, can you see pile after pile after pile of rocks stretching for miles? Or there's Holt's tractor. Anybody know who Benjamin Holt was? Benjamin Holt was the inventor of the Caterpillar tractor. There we have Caterpillar's first diesel. And diesel changes everything. Here's the Yuba River in 1952. Now there's engineering on a massive scale. This is one of my favorite ones. Joan Didion's quote, California had become, she said, all San Jose. Some of us who live in arid parts of the world think about water with the reverence others might find excessive. The water I will draw tomorrow from my tap in Malibu is today crossing the Mojave Desert and so on and so forth. Here's the California State Water Project. It's the most massive civil engineering project overall in the world, and we've been at it for about 100 years. Right. Or there's Folsom Dam in 1953. And of course, who built Folsom Dam? The United States government built Folsom Dam. There's a man-made mountain. When it was built, by far the biggest of its kind anywhere in the world, Oroville Dam, 80 million cubic yards of material. How much diesel did that take? Also in that same source, she wrote, I like to replay a morning when I was 17 years old and caught in a military surplus life raft in the construction of the Nimbus Afterbay Lake Natoma today, right? On the American River near Sacramento. I remember that at the moment it happened, I was trying to open a can of anchovies with capers. I recall the raft spinning into the narrow chute. See the narrow chute there to the east, where Hazel Boulevard sort of runs now? And she gets caught in the eddies, and she's deliriously happy. That's Sacramento today. And if you go through this legend, how big was it in 1850? How many people live in our region? Close to 3 million. There's California's urban areas today. Wow. Have we paved over a lot of paradise? Land subsidence. Land is in the San Joaquin Valley especially has dropped 20, 30, 40 feet in the last 5 decades from pumping water. Are we all familiar with this? Yeah. Are we going to have a lot more of those? Yes. There's salinity levels in the Central Valley. Almost a third of all the land in the Central Valley can't grow food anymore because irrigation water puts salt in them, and the salt accumulates. Where are we headed? California catastrophism. Everybody's loved to predict California's end, right? Last days of California. 2050, 50 million people in California by 2050. Wow. Wow. I want to thank the Sacramento Historical Society. Greg has been a terrific supporter and encourager. I want to thank, above all, Joan Didion and the Didion family for endowing this position, without which I wouldn't be here tonight.